700 years before Christ, the nation of Israel was in a perilous time. The godly king Uzziah had just died, and now the question was who was going to lead the nation. The nation was struggling with a decision: to follow idols or follow the living God, to live in obedience to God or in disobedience, to live humbly under God's authority or to do their own thing. During this time, there was a young man named Isaiah that had a passion for God and a passion for his people. God gave this young man an incredible gift that few people have ever gotten to see on this earth. This is what he says in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. He sees God, majestic, wearing a robe, high and lifted up, above and beyond all, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And he says above it stood seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. Why seraphim? What does that even mean? Those are a special class of angels. Seraph means burning in Hebrew. These are angels that are literally burning all the time. They're burning without being consumed. Special angels designed for a special purpose, to be close to God and to be consumed in His presence. But what is consuming them? Listen to verse 3. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory. It's the holiness of God that is consuming them. God is so holy, they cannot help but declare it perpetually throughout all eternity. These seraphim have been crying, ever since they were created, have been crying out, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with His glory. God is so holy that angels who are near Him cannot help but cry out His holiness. Well, Isaiah sees this. He sees God, he sees the holiness of God, and he's convicted of his sin. It says in verse 5, So I said, Woe is me! Woe is me! I am condemned, I am damned, I am guilty, I deserve to be in hell. Woe is me, for I am undone. I am melting, I am ruined, I am consumed by the presence of God. And then he says, Because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. He was convicted of his sin. When you get a real good understanding of the holiness of God, the brightness of His glory magnifies and clarifies the intensity of your own sin. Well, God's merciful, and He didn't leave Isaiah in that state. When he humbled himself and confessed his sin, it says, Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he'd taken from the tongs of the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, your sin is cleansed, it's purged. God cleanses us from our sin. Now, this was a temporary cleansing through fire. 700 years after this, Jesus Christ came to earth and died for us on the cross and rose again to give us a permanent cleansing from our sins through His blood. So Isaiah is convicted of his sin. He's cleansed of his sin, but that's not all. He says in verse 8, And then I heard the voice of the Lord calling, Who will I send, and who will go for us? And Isaiah said, Here am I, send me. And God said, Go and tell these people. He was called to tell others about God. I encourage you, spend some time alone. Get a bigger understanding, a bigger vision of God and His holiness. Deal with even the littlest sins in your life. And then listen to the voice of God, because He's calling. He's calling you to serve Him and to tell others of His love, His grace, His holiness, and His power.